Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Satan, Songs, and Crimson, out September 13th on Metal Blade Records. The album has 10 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio album. They are an English heavy metal band. As far as the design goes, I feel like this album is very simple in the way it's put together and the way it's created. It doesn't add unnecessary elements to it. It's straightforward. And it's straightforward also because it's really easy to detect the red line that connects all 10 songs, and that adds a sense of simplicity to the way you're going to perceive this record. But the more I listened to the album, the more that I saw that they did a really good job alternating tracks that had different perceptions and different perspectives in order to create more internal ebbs and flows and definitely make the album feel and sound a lot more dynamic and a lot more fluid. But I don't necessarily see the design of this record changing what you're going to get out of the record. The record is what it is. You could have moved some songs around. I think you would have gotten the exact same experience out of it. So it's a design that has that sense of simplicity, and because of that, it doesn't get into the way of actually appreciating the individual songs that the album has put forward. As far as the sound is concerned, this album obviously has those old school new wave of British heavy metal elements, and also a little bit of that is represented in the production behind the album. It's not an overly polished record. It's actually a record that has some roughness around the edges, that has some fuzz coming out of the guitars, that feels a little bit dirty at times in terms of how the sound is, creating a more organic, a more analog experience for the listener. In other words, creating a live studio perspective. This record really feels like a live performance. It has all the impurities that you would expect in a live performance, but in a studio record. And I think that is one of the main core elements of the sound on this album. The other core element that I felt was really important to mention is that this album, to me, has a little bit more of a progressive touch. Even though it has its roots in new wave of British heavy metal and classic heavy metal, this album pushes the barometer a little bit towards the more progressive rock side. And it's an interesting aspect because you could see that more progressive side of their sound coming through, not only from the guitars, but also from the bass, or the impact that the bass has on this album. Because do not kid yourselves, the bass on this record is very noticeable from the first to the last song. Now that alone doesn't make the record progressive, but the impact that the bass sound and that the bass playing has on every single song really allows you to push these tracks in slightly different directions, and it doesn't allow them to be very linear from beginning to end and follow more of a prototype approach. So the bass on this record has not only that impact in the sound, because it's very much in the forefront, very noticeable on every single track, but it has that secondary impact on the mood, on the vibe of the songs that shapes this album into that more progressive ground. Now, the guitar sound on this album also gives you at times a little bit of that progressive touch, but it never goes too far into it. It always finds a way of reaching a certain perimeter within the sonic landscape of the record and then pull itself back. It's an album that guitar-wise is very rich all around, but it's not necessarily a guitar-driven album. I felt like this record is perhaps more driven by the impact of the bass on the overall vibe of the record and the impact of the vocals than the guitars. The guitars are there. The guitars have a lot of texture to them. The guitars are very rich, but that doesn't mean they are sitting behind the steering wheel guiding the experience of the sound and the experience that the listener will get out of the album. And that to me was a little bit surprising, because I was expecting the guitars to have a more central focal point role in the entire design of the sound on this album. So to see them take a little bit of a passenger seat approach was quite surprising for me. I still enjoy the guitar sound. I still enjoy the impact. I like the solos on this record. I felt like they added a lot of value to the tracks. I also like the ability that they had to not make every solo have the same sort of backbone as far as sound is concerned. There are some solos on this record that have a lot of fuzz in them. There are solos on this record that have a little bit more of a warm experience. There are solos that have a little bit more over the top, that new wave of British heavy metal style approach. There are some that bring a little bit of melancholy and even a slightly doomy experience into the tracks. So the solos are very rich in terms of what they offer, and that gives the overall guitar sound a very rich perspective. But like I said, they're still a little bit secondary to everything else that is hitting the listener the moment you press play. Now, the drums in this picture, they felt very soft to me because the guitars don't have a driven impact, or at least they're not in the forefront of the sound experience, and the guitars don't have that same power. At times, the sound feels very depleted. It's almost like the sound feels slightly flat at times, with the only thing creating volume and substance within that sound really being the bass. I would have liked to see the drums have a little bit more strength, a little bit more volume, a little bit more substance within them, because at times they kind of became lost a little bit underneath the guitar sound when the guitars became a little bit more noticeable, a little bit more in the forefront. So it's not like the drum sound is not good or the execution is not good. I just would have liked to see the drums in the mix have a different role or play a more defining role throughout the entire record. Now, once you get into the vocals, you get a sense of consistency. I think what we've seen from Satan in the past is well represented on this record. I like the fact that the vocals on the album really go with the mood of the songs. You have some moments where the vocals go a little bit higher. You have some moments where the vocals are a little bit more layered, a little bit more textured, going even a little bit lower. But it's a vocal performance that feels very consistent from start to end. And I enjoy the layers that the vocals have throughout the record, because it gave them a bigger presence, it gave them bigger volume, it gave them a bigger stage. They're always in the forefront. It really feels like the sound at times is a little bit at a distance because of how much in the forefront the vocals are. I don't mind that approach. I like that approach. I would have just liked to see some of the other sonic elements sometimes catching up to those vocals in order to make not just forward movement in terms of ebbs and flows within the songs, but really create some lateral movement in order to give a little bit more width to some of these tracks. Because like I said, a lot of the songs on this album feel very narrow, and that takes away from the playability of the album, because it makes the album feel like it is too soft and it lacks a little bit of a punch. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Frantic Zero. This is the opening track on the album. It's perhaps one of the songs where you can feel the guitars a little bit more, at least in terms of driving the track. Not that you don't feel them, but you feel them driving the track a little bit more. Great bass line underneath, like really creating the texture for the track itself. The vocals are very loose, very free, and overall is a song that has a great tempo to it. And I think having a great tempo as an opening track is really important, because you want to set that mood, you want to get people engaged with the record right from the get-go. And this track has great vocals, great guitar moments, opens the album well, it has great energy to get things started. Then we have Sacramental Rites. Now this is a slow builder, it's a track that really builds up from the beginning, it builds up slowly, but I love the overall warmth of the guitar sound on this track. Once again, while not being necessarily the driver of the experience, it's definitely an element that creates a lot of texture within the song itself. The drums complement that guitar experience really well on this track. I felt like they added a little bit more volume to what the guitars were giving, and then the bass helps fill in the rest of the track, really creating a little bit more of a robust experience. The vocals jump off, and the vocals have the ability to really lead this song. They lead almost every single track on this record, but I felt like on this track they took a little bit more control, and they were perhaps a little bit more even in the forefront. It has a great chorus, it has this old school vibe all around, but the chorus really helps sell this song, which is true for a lot of the tracks on this record, where the chorus becomes memorable because of the simplicity that it offers. Now, last but not least, Captives. Now, this is my favorite track on the entire album. I think it's one of the most textures, one of the most rich tracks that the album has to offer. It's one also of the one that perhaps infuses a lot more energy. It feels like a super energetic track. It still has that great bass underlining sound to it, but the guitar sound on this track perhaps is the one where you feel like is not only creating that important warmth and texture throughout the song, is also pushing the song forward. It has a very rock and roll edge to it. It's out of the 3 songs that I pick, is definitely the most guitar-focused, guitar-centric, guitar-driven song, and I think it's one of the most guitar-focused and guitar-centric songs on the record. Very dynamic guitar-wise, offering a lot of different textures, a lot of different sounds, a lot of different experiences, not following necessarily a single pattern, but rather becoming energized and offering all of these different perspectives, which makes the song feel incredibly layered and rich, and it also has a chorus that lives up to everything else around it. This is it, Satan Songs in Crimson. Let me know your thoughts on this record. Comes out September 13th on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.